Hey guys, been a little while, been out and about, studying a bunch of stuff and thinking about a lot of stuff. And this is gonna be just it's just this idea I got in my head about people being animals. And I'm gonna start with Calvinism. And I think the more I've looked at it, there's not much of a difference between Calvinism and what an atheist would call determinism. And in this time that I've been away, I actually started researching violence because I was curious to map out some things for myself. And anyone that's watched James White's debates has heard the term that he uses a lot. He says that if it wasn't for God holding us back, you couldn't even walk outside. You would just be clubbed in the head and killed. And we're so depraved and lost. And a determinist atheist would say that you are just the sum of your biological parts, and basically someone who chooses to murder for fun is really not a murderer in the truest sense. What he is doing is just acting out on his biology. So they would use the illustration of if a bear mauled you, um, you would not be angry at the bear per se for attacking you, but they treat a human the same way. Well, if a human mauls you, it's the same thing as the bear. There's no difference between the two. And I will contest to you that that is correct. And I'll go into why I think that is true. But going back to James White's point, that is one of the most ignorant things I've ever heard. Because upon studying this, it just seems to be that God is holding us back only in the civilized countries. Um, Much beheading in the United States and the UK, and the cases of beheading in the UK in particular, those are Muslims from another uh, less evolved, socially evolved place. So apparently God only holds back the Americans from beheading as a common practice. It is one of the most ignorant statements I have ever heard. But there is some truth, I think, to the atheistic statement. And we're going to go back to Genesis and think about this for a second, because like I said, Calvinism to me, it's boredom. It's not Christianity. Let me just come out and say that. And I'm not judging any one person in particular, but I do want to make this point very clear as it flips the gospel on its head. And I do not know for the life of me how Arminians and Calvinists, um, I'm neither. I believe that God does intervene sometimes, and I also believe that he has perfect knowledge. So I think the truth is in the middle of all that. But the the Arminian camp, they say, well, is open theism, and I'm gonna tell you, hyper Calvinism is the only Calvinism that makes sense. There's no other way God could fulfill prophecy in the Calvinistic system without controlling every single little thing that you do, because it's like the butterfly theory. A butterfly flying on the other side of the world affects the air on this side of the world. So, and I believe God has perfect knowledge. I view God as more of a father figure, not a totalitarian figure per se, but I view him as someone who takes joy in his children learning and understanding. And I believe that's why we have this trait in the family today. But I don't know how non-Calvinist Christians can get along with Calvinists and call them Christians too. And I'm not saying this to judge people or make some grandiose stand against them and condemn them. That's God's business. But I will tell you, it's a different gospel. If you believe in free will and you know a Calvinist, he has a different gospel than you. And I'm going to go into that more in a second. But let's go back and look at Genesis. For all we want to argue and all we want to say and all we want to do, Genesis is clear. We're made of two components, the dust of the ground and the breath of God, the active force of God in us. I'm not going to get into a debate about what a soul is exactly, but let's use the working definition that it's you as a whole, your personality. Whether that personality extends past your current life and beyond the grave, or whether that personality is completely dependent on being in this body and being alive at the resurrection, those 2 points won't be needed for this discussion. The bottom line is we're made of 2 components. The Bible is clear about that. Now, what that gives rise to is not needed. So here you are, you're a person. Now, let's look at those 2 elements, the dust, the earth, and the godly, the Spirit of God that inhabits all of us, the active force of animation. And that's what all these arguments seem to come down to, is the simple fact you either choose to be an animal, the dust, or you choose to transcend what you are and become a spiritual being. And ultimately that fulfillment would be in the resurrection. And I can understand why Gnostics would have evolved the way they do. Who has not looked out at the world and been so upset? And I'm telling you, the things that I've come across in these last couple of weeks, and I've made myself watch this stuff. 14-year-old children being beheaded, families being chopped up with axes. In Mexico is insane amount of violence with the drug cartels, and they kill people. It's not even religious based. It has nothing to do with religion. It's completely secular. It's one drug area wants to overrun another drug area. I mean, 14-year-old boys, and they make them repeat this stuff so they can send a message, and then they behead them. They cut their heads off. The brutality is unbelievable. The Middle East, the stonings of people, they hitting them in the head so hard with a rock that it literally squishes it like a watermelon. If you've never looked into this stuff, and I was keyed on to this by talking to people I know that are in the military, unless you really look into it, you have no idea how animalistic a lot of this world is. So that's going to be my basic premise. You have 2 natures inside of you. Now, I don't want to get on this Trinity track, but there are 2 things that cohabitate within you. And it is the mind of what is seen and the mind of that which is not seen. And I think that's what the Bible represents. That's what God represents. All throughout history, wanting to become more than human. And I would contest to you that having a relationship with God is the only way to truly be human. Now, I think there are people who have relationships with God that aren't even really aware of them. And, and the Bible is clear about this. And this is why I'm going to get back into the Calvinistic discussion of it all, is that you're judged by your character. I did a video, The New Judaizers. It was the last one I did before I went on this hiatus. And I never have I been so impressed with the comments that were left. Because the video basically was about sin in general, and there were so many good thought-provoking comments, and there was no hatred, no garbage being slung around. It was a really nice way to go into taking a break. It gave me a lot to think about, and it was a beautiful thing for me to see, because usually you get the average high percentage of garbage comments. But so, as I left, off of that and started looking into everything, and I looked at this Calvinistic thing again, to me, it's just a form of atheism. Jesus did not come to show us what was not possible. He came to show us what was possible. And that all starts with a decision. A decision. Do you want to be more than an animal? And until our creation is completed in the final judgment of all things, we wrestle with that. We wrestle with the nature of doubt. And what Calvinism and determinism both do is dismiss that. They take the gospel of what is possible and make it the gospel of what is not possible. I'm reminded of the story of Peter that we find in Matthew chapter 14, verse 22. He says, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way away from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. But the disciples saw him walking on the sea. They were terrified and said, it is a ghost. And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. And Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. He said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. In the Calvinistic and deterministic point of this story, what is the point? Did God make Peter ask Jesus, who being himself God, command Peter to walk out of the boat onto the water, only to make him doubt and fail and fall into the water, and then criticize him for having faith that was not strong enough? I would contest to you that Peter started to get it. The Father's Spirit was upon Peter. He was starting to understand. He felt bold in that moment of faith. And he lashed out into the water to be with Jesus. We see the model of how these things are to be done. Yet he began to doubt. And I will tell you, he doubted of his own mind. For a moment he was caught up. He had no doubt. He was unafraid. But once he was there, he began to look around him and saw that this should not be possible. So Jesus reprimands him and says, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Why did you doubt? Well, the Calvinistic answer is simple. You doubted because I made you doubt. Again, Jesus preaches the gospel of things that are not possible. But I think the story is clear. And think of all the situations in the Bible where someone's faith is tested, whether it's by God or by their own accord, wishing to make a statement about themselves and about their faith. Calvinism, which is nothing more than the atheistic determinism, takes those stories and turns them into stories of things that are not possible. With God or without, they're just not possible. You're nothing but a toy that God pushes to and fro, and no matter what he says is just. And I would contend to you the reason God is just is because he says what is just. He is true because he says what is true. We do have the capability to map out common facts and understandings. And when you are willing to take God and make him less than a human in his ability to love, to forgive, and to foresee, you're saying God can't function if free will exists. You're saying it's not possible. It is one limitation on God after another. But I would contend to you is that God created this system this way for a reason. And I don't understand everything, and I would be highly contentious of anyone who said that they did. Well, that would bring us back to Calvinists, wouldn't it? They even know God has a secret will, and they know exactly what it is. God's not a very good secret keeper, I suppose. And the second symptom of this is making Jesus God. It instantly makes everything that Jesus was and Jesus accomplished off limits. It makes it the gospel of what is not possible. And as we watch the church fall apart day by day, multi-million-dollar facilities, preachers that are rich, divorced, adulterers, it goes on and on. And I'm not putting a mantle of perfection on any of those people, but those people are so far removed from even caring about the sins that they do. And they all rely on changing the gospel. If you go back and you watch my video about the Judaizers and I start quoting all those verses, it is clear God does not judge you on a theology. He does not judge you on a race. He does not judge you on your skin color. He does not judge you on your mental abilities to think and have a high IQ. He judges you on the quality of your character. Revelations could not be more stunningly clear. The books were open, and every man was judged by his deeds. Then we must ask ourselves, what deeds will you have if you are a Calvinist or a determinist? What will you possibly even try to do? Because you believe that God controls every action, at least the ones that matter anyway. And you're not even along for the ride. You're actually a puppet who just does what an animal does. Most Calvinists don't even have a preaching of lordship salvation. The hyper-Calvinists, I believe, have it right as far as Calvinism goes. Same with the determinists, the hyper-determinists. Myself, the way I live my life, I take full accountability for my actions. When I get up in the morning, I do not feel a force is pushing me to do evil or good. I feel that when I seek out God and I pray and I think, I'm led, I'm encouraged down a path by walking in faith. And sometimes I get like Peter and I reach out far beyond what I'm comfortable doing. But never have I felt that's because God made me or pushed me. I have felt God has created circumstances that would promote me to think in a certain way. Absolutely. I no longer try and make my life about where I'm going tomorrow. I try to focus on where I'm at now and making the best decisions within the constructs of where I am. But again, are you an animal? I hate this world. Not the creation itself, not the beautiful mountains and the seas and the rains and the sunsets, but what people have done, the violence. And everyone's looking for a way out. They're looking for a way not to own what they've done. And I would contend to you that is the surest way to not be forgiven, is to not take ownership for what you've done. Realizing what you really are, and I would contend to you that is a vessel of opportunity, whether it be good or whether it be bad. God's going to judge you on your character. And if your character is one of denial, there's nothing wrong with you. I think God will beg to differ. So, in thinking about all this, I would just be very careful if I was toying around with Calvinism. It is a form of humanism that's connected to atheism. You go look at Augustine. He was a Gnostic himself. That's why these people hate sex and all these other things. Sex in a marriage is perfectly healthy and good. But if you go back and you look at these people, they were less than men. they were animals. True men and women stand up for what's right. They take accountability for what they've done. How does a Calvinist feel when they go to church and they cry out, "God save me"? What does it even mean? Is God making you cry out? Are you crying out in your limited free will, but God didn't choose you, so you're wasting your time? At least he could have the courtesy to tell you, in the end, you won't be saved. So go enjoy your life now. Do whatever it is you want to do, because hell awaits. All these systems have one thing in common. They make God less than a man. And how odd it is that they make a man God. Jesus was the example of what is possible. All these theologies take that away. They focus on, do you believe Jesus is God, or do you call out the name Jesus as God to be saved? Your behavior is not really an issue. I would contend to you that God seeks men of character. Good character, not perfect character, but good character, willing to act in accordance with love and mercy, even when times get hard. And shall we fail and we return to the Father and we seek that again, he will give it to us, because he is faithful and he is more than a man. The question is, again, do you want to be more than an animal? To do so, you will have to shake off these bonds of determinism. You will have to wipe the idea that God has chosen you before the hands of time to salvation or destruction. You will have to love God, and you will have to ask him the tough questions. You will have to stand up to transcend your humanness. And I say that in the form of the bestial humanness. There is a spiritual humanism, in my opinion, and that is one that is dwelt by the Father as embodied by the Son. You truly learn to become human. And like I said, I think there are people who are learning this that don't even know it. And all too often, we're back to our theologies for salvation. Well, you tell me, where in the Bible are you saved by your theology? It's foolishness, and it's a way of self-deception to get you through your life and not have to answer for any of the tough things that you've done. But you will answer one day. And even then, will you go to judgment saying that it wasn't me? You made me do it. The devil made me do it. You are your own worst enemy. I would contend you, the devil doesn't even need to possess people. They'll become so disillusioned from reality and what it meant to be a well-rounded human being, they will make themselves animals. Until they are educated and they open up their mind, they always will be an animal. They can call on the name of Jesus. They can call on the name of God. They can denounce the devil. But ultimately, it's a cold, lifeless doctrine. Ultimately, you have no say in the matter. And someone who believes in free will doesn't think they have a say in the matter. Judgment, it belongs to God. But we do think we have a say in our character. And when we beg the Father to teach us and to enlighten us, you want to overcome sin? Love helps. Knowledge helps. But it's the wisdom of God. In my personal experience, I would not really say that God took something from me. I hear this a lot in churches, and if that's what happened to you, or that's what you feel, I don't challenge that. I won't argue with you. But I noticed in my life, it's God has given me the wisdom and the knowledge and the strength to resist the sin. I don't always succeed, But I don't think, in my personal opinion, God just takes sin away from you. That's like a gay Christian. Do they ever stop feeling gay? I don't know. But if they withhold themselves from doing those things, then they're obeying out of love and wisdom. Which would bring me to another point. Calvinism and determinism share another point in their theologies, and that is you don't know where your thoughts come from. You'd have to know what you were thinking before you thought it. And I could say there's some truth in that kind of thinking. Sometimes I don't know where these thoughts come from. Subliminal, God, the world, my busy mind. But I will say this without any hesitation, is that even though these thoughts may come to me, I can overcome them, which tells me I'm more than an animal. If you have a sin of lust enter into your mind, I challenge you, at that moment, pray. Drop down to your knees and pray. And pray out loud. That thought will leave you. I promise you. So, as you look at the toothless dog, the disease that is Calvinism, it seems to be becoming more, and that type of thinking seems to be more and more prevalent. Even the atheists are hard on that train right now. Accountability is becoming a thing of the past. So I hope for some, this gives you pause to think, to at least sit back and say, you know, maybe he's right. Maybe when I get up in the morning, I don't feel like I'm being driven to sin or driven to do good. I feel like everyone else. And that's what I would tell you. Calvinists live their life just like free will people. So even then, the doctrine has no power. It doesn't matter. The only time it deviates from the free will crowd is that they will go out and sin and say, well, this is what God wanted me to do. This is how his power of forgiveness is manifested in the world by me sinning. So they know the secret will of God. In your mind, you think children are raped because God wants them raped. But even in the Old Testament, he told them burning babies was something that never crossed his mind. If you believe this disease, I'm going to tell you, you are sick. You don't want to transcend your animal self. You don't want to become a living spirit, to become alive, to experience God. And I don't know what happens to them at judgment. I'm making no such claim, but I will tell you, think about it. You live no differently than a free will person. You just have a built-in excuse to sin. Then the Trinity gives you another built-in excuse not to raise the standard. If you look at Jesus as a man, which is what I believe the Bible clearly presents him as, it's heavy. Because he is the example of what is possible. He did not preach a doctrine of what is not possible. So, I've gone on long enough. Like I said, I've been away for a little while. Hi to all my YouTube friends. Gotten emails, and I've been keeping up with everything. So I definitely seen all the videos and stuff people have been posting. I just needed to think about some things and got a lot on my mind right now. But I'll be around. But God bless, and remember, are you an animal? That's the question.